Hello and welcome to another update, and today I'm back on my PC. So I'll be doing a general quick recap over the past few days that I've been recording on my phone, and then we'll get on to the latest news and updates on the front line, specifically around Bakhmut, because that is by far the most important hotspot of the war right now. But let's get right into it. So past couple of days I have not been reporting on the Crimea front, so the fighting continues as usual. There's just this update right here west of Chernipovivka, where the Ukrainian forces managed to capture this territory here to the west of Chernipovivka on the 17th of April. So they managed to capture these three forest patches here to the west of the village, and this is I wouldn't say very significant, but not insignificant either, as it is territory that, well, the Russians have held for 2 months now, and it makes the Ukrainian positions closer to Chernipovivka, so they are within firing range of the village. But at the same time, the village itself is on a higher elevation, so the village itself is well defended. So until we actually see some entrance and fighting within the village, the advances here won't be very significant. But it is still an advance nonetheless, as it allows the Ukrainian forces to hold these forest patches here to the east of this open field. So it gives them an advantage in that sense, that they don't have to stand and fight in the open field, which makes them easier targets for drones as well as the Russian Air Force. We also see fighting here. Russian forces have actually recaptured parts of this area. I'll make sure to get on it later. But essentially the Russian forces managed to advance slightly here to the southwest. As for the Belorivka area, the fighting continues in this area. There's actually been some territorial changes, and I should probably get on that as well. I remember hints about the different places, so I forgot to actually add some of them. But I'll be doing an in-depth later, because right now I'm on a tight schedule. But from tomorrow on, I'll have plenty of time. Then we see here by the Bakhmut area, fighting continues as usual outside of the city. But then within the city itself, it is extremely heavy fighting, shown by how many guns I've put here. Before we get to the Bakhmut area, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, as it helps me out a lot. So we see here fighting continues by the 00506 road between Bakhmut and Jasovia, and we see that the Russian forces have actually managed to reach this road, as we can see with this picture here. From it we can see that the Russian forces have actually managed to reach this road. This means that the fighting is occurring on the road, which means that the supply has essentially been cut through it. As for the slightly to the east of that, we see fighting continues in the direction of Holmove, as the Russian forces are attempting to take on full control over the forest line here to the north of the village, as well as advance towards it from multiple directions. As for the city itself, so ever since I left, the Ukrainian forces have been pushed back severely here in the northern part of the city, as Russian forces are already having a foothold and passing the Rose Alley area. The Russian forces have gained significant advantages and advances here to the north of the city, as they have pushed the Ukrainian forces back from this whole residential area and are now fighting by the garage area here to the south of that position. Then we also see the Russian forces pushing westwards, where they are now fighting and have captured the hospital and are now in full control over this Chernipovskovo street here to the northwest of the hospital area. And they've also captured multiple of these buildings here to the east of the hospital area. And fighting continues by the Tulpohina street. So they're trying to take control over the northwestern area and push further towards Holmove. At the same time, they're pushing southwards here in this direction to go around the garage area, while they are at the same time attacking the garage area head on. And they're also flanking the southern parts, trying to move westwards from the second train station. And they're also pushing westwards from the main train station, where they've managed to capture this foothold across the rail lines. We also hear reports of fighting here to the west of that position. However, it is not clear exactly where the fighting is occurring, but this may indicate that rather than a Ukrainian-held territory, it is a fairly large gray zone, as the Ukrainians could have withdrawn to some of these garage areas as well as high-rise buildings areas. So most likely Ukrainian forces actually holding this area right here and have retreated from residential areas, and the Russian forces are just trying to push through these areas, trying to prevent any traps from the Ukrainians to actually hit the Russian positions, and at the same time prevent any Ukrainian ambushes and so on. So that's why it's taking a long time for them to advance. But that could also be why we're seeing a constant advance by the Russian forces. As we have seen, they have managed to capture the rest of the eastern part of the rail lines, and at the same time they have now pushed on to the western side as they continue their attempts at taking control over these areas, as well as reaching this river line here to the south of the city. They will try to push along these roads and reach the educational center, and at the same time they'll push towards these high-rise buildings here to the west of the city. So with all of these developments, we see that the Russian forces are constantly pushing on the whole front line in Bakhmut as they try to gain further control over the western part of the city and push the Ukrainians out. And according to Remy, the Russian forces actually have cut down the Ukrainian forces to only 5,000 left within the city. The Ukrainian forces have mostly left to protect the flanks of Ivanivske, Khomove, and Bohdanivka. So in these directions, the Ukrainian forces have significantly reinforced these areas because the Russian forces and the VDV soldiers, who are accompanied the Wagner soldiers on the flanks, are pushing to the roads as well as entering the villages, which gives them an advantage in the sense that they don't have to attack across open fields, but they've actually reached the villages. And that will allow the Russian forces to actually cut off the supply lines, which would encircle the last 5,000 soldiers. So they're trying to reinforce their flanks to prevent any encirclement, and at the same time the Russian forces keep on pushing in these locations. Then we move on to the Avdiivka area. Here there's been essentially no updates since the last time I reported on it. Fighting just continues in the usual areas, west of Krasnoorivka, in the Kamyanka area, southwest of Avdiivka by Upitne, north of Vodiane in direction of Severna, and in the Pervomaisk area, north, center, and to the south in the direction of Nevelske. The same with the Marinka area. However, there's actually been this update here, where the Russian forces managed to capture the densest area, as well as the fire station here by the center, which means that they've pushed through, and with the control over the southern area, the Russian forces essentially have a great position, as there is a height elevation between these two areas. So most likely the Russian forces will try to push through and flank the Ukrainian positions, and at the same time attack head-on, as they have been doing. Then to the south of that, fighting continues by Pobieda, east of Novohylivka, and by Vuhledar. So all in all, we see the Russian forces are continuing their attacks. They are not slowing down, and they're specifically focusing heavily around Bakhmut. And at the same time, according to the very latest news by Remy, the Russian forces actually received further reinforcements this past few days, which means that they have a significant advantage now as their numbers keep increasing and the Ukrainian numbers keep dwindling. As I mentioned, they have about 5,000, that is the estimate, and the previous number estimate I had was from a history legends video where he estimated somewhere between 10 and 15,000. So it's either halved or become a third of what it had about a couple of weeks ago. So the Russian advantage has significantly increased, and at the same time we see that, according to Remy again, the Russian forces actually sold some Air Force jets to Iran, and in exchange they have not taken payment in cash. They have instead taken payment in Shahed drones. So it is an estimated of 6,000 to 8,000 Shahed drones in exchange for those fighter jets. So they have received a heavy shipment of Shahed drones the past few days, which means that we will see a significant increase of the Russian use of drones here in the coming days and weeks, all over Ukraine, not just in Bakhmut. And at the same time, we see with the latest gliding bombs, as well as the increased use of the Air Force by Russian forces, the Russian forces are now using 1,500 kilos or 1.5 ton glide bombs, as well as bombs through the jets. And at the same time, they may increase that to 3,000 or 4,000 kilos or 3 to 4 tons according to some random source that I don't know, so I will not testify that they are accurate, but there's a very real possibility that that could be the case. And they also mentioned that it will be increased from the current state of about 5 planes a day to about 40 planes a day, which in case of a Ukrainian offensive would completely devastate the chances of that succeeding, as 3 to 4 ton bombs being dropped on an open field, for example in Zaporizhia, where the Ukrainian forces are advancing, that would have devastating effects on those forces. They will be similar to what we see with the U.S. Air Force in their previous wars, how devastating their effects have been. This will not reach that level at all, but it will be a step in that direction for the Russian forces. So the longer this war goes on, actually the more they learn, and the more effective the Air Force will be, the more effective the army will be. And sometimes people forget that. The difference between Ukraine and Russia isn't just equipment, manpower, and so on. It is also the fact that with these advantages, the Russian forces also have more room, more space to learn. So they are learning a lot through these experiences. And if we look at history, Russia's always started wars slowly, like they get hit on the face. They are like taking heavy losses and so on at the start of wars, and then as the war goes on, they learn more and more, and eventually they come out on top due to their resilience and just the amount of casualties they can take, how much equipment they have to spare, and all of these things. They have a lot to expend, which means that they have a lot to learn. And that is all for this update. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.